So today we're gonna do Pilates with a little extra prop. So obviously you can do any of these exercises without, but if you've got a stability ball or a fitness ring for a little bit more excitement, we'll be using those today. And if you don't have either, if you've got like a short foam roller, you can always hold that, or a yoga block is a good substitute too. Anything for comfort, so towel for knees, head pad, you can always use a pillow as well, or fold your yoga mat. That's a nice little hack. We're just gonna do a little bit of everything today. So we'll start with a little standing warm up here. Well, let's go legs a little wider. We're just gonna start with standing rotation. So letting every joint move, knees, hips, really rotating from your waist. So kind of notice if just the arms are swinging, and see if you can let your waist and your upper back twist. And you can make this a little more vigorous and move faster, or you can keep it a little bit more controlled. Seeing how far you can look back and noticing that with our eyes, we get a little bit more cervical spine and thoracic rotation. Let's try one more each way. Trying to connect in with the breath here. And then bring those feet a little bit closer. Let's do some shoulder rolls. We'll do one at a time. So a little bit of rotation as we shoulder roll back. You can think if there was like a little kayaker in your ribs, they're kayaking the shoulders back one at a time. And then we'll reverse it. Adding a little roll forward with a little rotation, accessing some breath into the sides and the back of the rib cage here. Last one. We're gonna clasp our hands. We'll take a little protraction stretch. So if you want to keep your legs straight, you're gonna push your upper back and your palms far away from each other. If you want a little bit more of a stretch through the QL, you can bend the legs and maybe take a little hip wiggle from side to side. So you're getting a nice stretch through the whole back line here. And then we'll straighten up, pulling the elbows back, you're gonna lift the chest. So protraction and retraction, right? So I'm spreading my shoulder blades. And then when I come into my retraction, I'm gonna plug them back together. So just building some awareness. We'll do some stuff on hands and knees today. Let's go for 2 more of these little stretches. Finding neutral in the middle and then lifting the sternum. Last one. We'll bring some awareness to our shoulder blades, because that's kind of where our arms start in a sense. You can think of like wings of a butterfly or wings of a bird. Let's bring our feet a little bit closer together. We're gonna do a couple roll downs. So nodding the chin, letting the crown of the head rotate. We're gonna roll it all the way down. Notice if the knees want to lock or the weight wants to shift into the heels. See if you can draw the weight forward. Relaxing the back of the neck here, right? Especially our Zoom neck after this last year. And then easy breath, exhaling, pushing through the legs. And let's just do like a nice little sweep up. Find a little stretch here through the sides of the torso. And then come down again. This time we're going to add a little stretch. So I'm rolling down. When you're at the bottom, let one knee bend and sit into the opposite hip. And then try that on the other side. Finding some breath, seeing if you can ungrip through the back of the skull. You can always have hands on the shins or on the ankles if you need a little bit more support. And so just one more little knee bend and hip sit to each side. And then find your weight nice and even through the whole surface of your foot. Relax the back of the skull and push to come all the way back up. We'll sweep our right arm up. You can either side bend here. So think of really reaching up. So we're more interested in the stretch on that side instead of crunching on the opposite side. If you want more, you can step that right leg back and get a nice little calf stretch. Then we'll try that on the other side. So either just sweeping up and getting this nice stretch through the side of the body, or stepping the same leg back. So we're on the left side now. And getting a nice little calf stretch here. And let's do that one more time here. So we'll sweep that right leg back. If you're taking your calf stretch variation, if the ribs like to splay, see if you can soften through the rib cage a bit here. We're gonna get a little more access in our side stretch when our thoracic spine and our pelvis are stacked. Last one here, easy head. And then we'll come back here. So we'll come to the back of the mat. We'll do a little roll down. We're gonna come down to our hands and knees. So if you wanna grab your kneeling pad or fold your mat, make any adjustments here, we're gonna walk out. So in our hands and knees, just stacking your wrists underneath your shoulders here, making sure our fingers aren't internally rotated. Take a couple step isolations here. So I'm gonna let my chest fall through my arms, shoulder blades come together, then I'm gonna press away. I'm just noticing, right, when we do our cat-cows, all three of these parts are integrated. So I've got shoulder blade movement, spinal movement, and pelvic movement. Can we isolate this? And obviously the spine's connected, so you get a little movement here. And then pause, find your nice neutral position so you're pushing out of the ground. Find a couple cat-cows just with your pelvis. So I'm gonna scoop my low abs in, and then I'm gonna lengthen and open my sits bones back. It's gonna be a pretty small range of motion as I come into this little scoop, and then extending the tailbone. And again, your spine will reflect this motion just a little bit, but seeing if you can isolate just the hips initiating. And so now with that initiation coming from the low core, combine all parts. So you got your whole spine moving, you're protracting your shoulder blades, you're gonna gaze towards your thighs, nice breath in, and then opening the sits bones back, extending the chest forward. I'm still really activating through the shoulder blades here as I extend. And we'll do that again. So scooping the abs in, rounding the spine, and then extending the chest forward as you open the sits bones here. Let's just take one more like this. We'll come to a neutral position here. We're gonna go right away into bird dog. So we'll tap opposite hand and toes to the edge of the mat, or maybe float the limbs up if you're ready. And then drawing those limbs back in, and we'll try the other side. So really working on the stabilization of your supporting limbs and keeping an eye as you take these if there's any shift in the hips or in the ribs. So can you keep those obliques really active? So anti-rotational movement is where we're really gonna get those obliques going. And let's try just one more each way. Keeping the back of the neck nice and long, finding some breath. Nice, when you finish your last one, you can cross your ankles and sit onto your bum here. So if you've got your ball block, or if you wanna get a little fancier, your fitness ring, you can place that in between your inner thighs here. And then we're gonna start with a little half roll back. So obviously a little bit more intense inner thigh work when you have a wider item. Hi. No, it's live too. It started at 11. So if you wanna grab a mat and grab a ball or a fitness ring, yeah, come on in, yeah. All right, so we'll reach the arms forward. We're gonna roll back just off the sits bones. And then we're only gonna go to like the top of the pants. So just gonna PSIS, take a nice breath in. And we're gonna exhale to scoop and curl. Yeah, find your sits bones, and then we'll do that again. And you can use either of these guys, yeah. And then we'll roll it back up. So as you take a couple here, just noticing that's your pelvis that's gonna initiate the rolling down. Grab one of each, yeah, and you can play with both. And then we'll exhale, fold at the ribs. Nice. And then on this next one, we're gonna stay. So we're gonna roll back just off our sits bones here. So we're gonna maintain this C curve. So we wanna be conscientious of is not starting to come into an arch, but we're staying kind of curled up and over. And we're just gonna reach one arm up to the ceiling and then lower that arm back down. Nice, and then trying the other side. Yeah, and so just keeping that torso stability. And this is really tricky. A lot of times we wanna let the ribs do our lifting. So maybe I have to curl up just a little bit higher to make sure I can maintain this. It's like giving your shoulder blade permission to move, but you're keeping the whole trunk stable. Nice, then you can come all the way up when you've done that last one. We're gonna go right back down and we're gonna do a little different arm movement. So kind of finding that place where you can maintain your C curve. We're just opening the right arm out without letting anything turn or twist, and then bring that arm back. Yeah, and then trying just the left side. So here again is your oblique work, so anti-rotational. Can I keep not only the C curve, so tons of low abdominal stability and deep hip, but also can I keep my trunk from rotating? And we'll just try one more each way. Just kind of keeping an eye on the ribs if they want to twist at all here. Yeah, nice, then you can roll all the way down. So if you have a ring, you can hold it for this next series. If you've got your ball or block, you can also hold it here. So we're gonna take a couple shoulder bridge. Pull your feet a little bit closer to your bum. We're gonna scoop through the abdominals, and then instead of smashing the back, think of scooping just like you did in your cat-cow to lift the hips. We'll reach the knees up and over the toes. There's a little bit more weight in the heels. Watch for coming too high into the upper back here, and then lengthen and lower back down. We're just gonna take a couple nice articulated hip rolls. So scooping those abs, peeling one vertebrae at a time off, keeping that weight evenly distributed, right? Both sides nice and long. And then lengthening and lowering back down, just kind of noticing if there's any spots where a couple vertebrae kind of clunk down at the same time. Can you keep your bum up a little bit higher for a little bit longer so that you can create a little more time to roll down? So make sure you work your low core just a little bit more. And then we'll hold up on the next one. So if you need support, you can always lower the arms, but try to keep the arms up to the ceiling here. We're gonna exhale and float one leg to tabletop. Take a nice breath in, and then lower that leg down. Stabilize through the supporting leg, and then see if you can float the opposite leg up. So on your own time, we're gonna take a couple marches here, going back and forth, so just alternating sides. Again, just like our bird dog, can you keep the supporting hip really stable? So there's no shift or drop or collapse before we float the opposite leg up. And if you've got that ring or ball, you can squeeze into your ring or ball just a little bit, and you might notice that it gives you a little bit more abdominal feedback, which is kind of nice. So glute inner thighs on, squeezing that ring or ball. And we're just gonna try one more each way. Last one. And then when you're even, take a nice breath in at the top. You're gonna lower all the way back down. We're gonna sweep the arms overhead here. We're gonna work in a neutral to start. So I'm gonna reach my arms to the ceiling and then exhale to curl up. I'm gonna reach that ring or ball just above my knees and then exhale to lower back down. Yeah, so a little ab prep here. And you can use your eyes to follow your prop. And that gives you a nice little, good cervical spine placement. So if our legs wanna lift, right, if we kind of feel that like kind of pop where they sort of jump up, we're not gonna come up so high that we feel like the legs wanna come off the ground. So it's definitely more of a crunch. I'm just being conscientious that we're keeping the pelvis in neutral here. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna take two more like this. So exhaling to float. Keep that little bit of a squeeze on your prop here. On the next one, we're gonna stay up. So inhaling and exhaling. Take a nice breath in here. You're gonna exhale, rotate so that your left hand is outside of your right thigh. Inhale through center, and then exhale, rotate so that your right hand is outside of your left thigh. So I'm just gonna inhale through center and exhale to twist. I'm staying in my ab prep the whole time, and I'm trying to keep squeezing my ring or ball. Keep those shoulder blades off the mat. So if you notice that it becomes more of a lean, you'll find yourself kind of weighting to one side. See if you can stay centered through your upper middle back. Yeah, nice exhaling. We'll do one more each way. Check in with the neck. So if you feel like the neck is doing a lot of lifting, see if you can bring it back into the upper ribs. And last one to the left. Nice, and you can lower all the way back down. So we'll keep the arms reaching to the ceiling. Come into your imprint. So this is your flat back position where our obliques are gonna draw our ribs and hips together. You're gonna float one leg at a time into tabletop. So we'll start with just some toe taps here. So I'm just gonna let that thigh reach away. Whether I touch the ground or not, doesn't really matter. We're just increasing the ab work as the thigh reaches away from the torso. So you're trying to keep your back in that position, right? Ribs aren't popping, abs aren't popping, back isn't popping. Supporting legs really stable. Again, see if you can keep a little bit of a squeeze. If you wanna make this more challenging, just reach those arms overhead. So the further my arms are away from my legs, right, I've increased the load. Now my upper abs have to work a little bit harder to keep my rib cage in control. If you wanna make this harder still, you can always tap the legs a little bit further away. So just elongating that 90-degree position. Really keep the thigh moving versus the knee bending. And we'll take one more each way here. Nice, and then you can take your ring or your ball, you're gonna pop it in between your thighs, And then reach your arms out to a T. We're gonna do a little twist. So as I let my left hip lift, my legs are gonna fall to the right, only so far as I can keep my left shoulder blade on the ground. I'm gonna exhale, squeeze that ringer ball and draw the legs back up. Right, and I could do this without a prop, of course, just a good reminder that your knees will be staying together. So you have to give that top hip permission to float up so the pelvis doesn't shear. And just easy exhale to draw the legs back in. If you want to make this harder, what could you do? You could straighten the legs out. So just by lengthening those legs, a little bit longer lever, so it's a little bit more work for my abs. And we'll just do one more set here. So evening yourself out, one more to the right, one more to the left. Exhaling, making sure you don't go so far that you feel like you're wrenching in your low back. Nice, and then you can take that ring out, pull your legs into your chest. Let's go right hand to right shin or knee and left hand to left shin or knee, and take a couple circles here with your knees. So just circling in and out and around. Letting your arms do the work so your hip flexors can relax a little bit here, and then reversing your circles. We'll take this into a gentle twist. So this time you can let your legs fall all the way over to the right. Your right hand can be on that top thigh, and then sweep that left arm up and over, really letting that shoulder blade open. If you want a little bit more here, you can always lengthen that bottom leg long for a deeper stretch. Just take a couple breaths, whether the neck turns or not. Maybe closing the eyes, just kind of noticing where do you have access to breathe in your twist. Just can make it a little bit harder to find space. If you imagine there's like a little inner tube kind of in between your hips and your ribs, can you find some breath into that inner tube? And you can sweep your arm all the way up and over your head, and then draw both legs back to center, and we'll just let those legs fall over to the opposite side here. And again, you can add a little bit more if you want to lengthen that bottom leg long. If there's anything going on in the SI, you might find that the stacked twist is a little bit nicer, a little more supportive, and see if you can find some breath on this side. And just a little body scan, kind of notice the differences from side to side. Any similarities, any asymmetries. And then we'll sweep that top arm all the way over again, and then you can hug those legs in, and we'll come back onto our back for a little bit more hip work here. So we'll start with the right leg. We're gonna come back into that imprint position. We're gonna start with the right leg in our tabletop here. We're just gonna make a couple circles. So we're gonna go 5 circles in one direction and 5 circles in the other. You can have your left leg either bent for more support or long for a little bit more challenge. Just make sure your glutes on, so really flex through that supporting foot. Arms can be down or up. We're just gonna make some little hip circles here. And you're only gonna go as big and as fast as you feel like you can keep your trunk really stable. So again, here's your oblique work, anti-rotational. When you finish your 5, you can reverse it. So it's kind of like a leg circle, right? But we're taking out some of the load. So if we get a lot of clicking in the hips, we're gonna try to move in a range of motion where there isn't a lot of noise. And then when you finish that last one, you can just grab that shin, pull it in, give it a nice little squeeze here. We'll exchange legs. So we'll switch to our other side, still in our imprint. You can have the option to bend or straighten that supporting leg, arms down or up, and then take 5 circles, just finding that range of motion. Good hip circumduction without any popping or gripping. And then when you finish your 5, try the reverse. If you can stay really active through your supporting side and stay just as heavy on the straight supporting leg as on your mobilizing leg. Nice, you can pull that leg into your chest, give it a little squeeze. So we're gonna kind of repeat this, but we're gonna make it a little bit more exciting now. So we'll come into our shoulder bridge. You can pull your feet a little bit closer to your bum. Again, hands down or up. We're gonna press into our shoulder bridge. So find that nice stable position where we're not too high in the ribs. We're gonna stabilize through our left supporting glute and then float that right leg up. We're gonna do our 5 circles in one direction in our shoulder bridge. And you might find, okay, maybe I couldn't get quite as exciting in this as you did on the mat. So you can keep your left side really stable, definitely turns up the work, and then reverse it. Noticing if the weight's really wanting to lean into one shoulder blade more than the other. See if you can even it out here. Nice. Pause when you finish that last one. Lower the leg down. See if you can stay up and just refresh. The opposite side, we're going to float that left leg up. And then we'll take those 5 circles on this side. So I'm keeping those upper abs really engaged, keeping the whole surface of the foot connected onto the ground. Let's reverse this here. After your 5, you're going to go the other direction. Both sides of my torso are staying really long. So I'm trying not to hike my hip or shrink into my torso. And last one, and then you can lower that leg down. Nice, reach your arms all the way overhead, just rest them on the ground, and then you can roll your spine all the way back down for a nice little stretch here. All right, so a little ab work. You can clasp your hands behind your head. So we're gonna go into just a little bicycle movement here. So I'll float my legs one at a time, still in imprint, into tabletop, and then we're gonna curl up. Now you can set your head down at any point if you need a little break. And we're just gonna go into a little bicycle. So just nice and easy, keeping the hips really stable here. So noticing if there's any shifting or shortening in the torso, and then supporting the neck with your head. So kind of generally gazing like above the knees is kind of a good spot. And if you notice that the shoulders are down, but the neck is up, see if you can either rest the head, right? That just might be a little bit of a sign that we're fatiguing, or curl up a little bit higher through those upper abs. Yeah, nice. So the next time your right leg is in, you're gonna pause. Now you can choose your height, right? My left leg can be higher for more support, lower for more challenge. Lower your head and shoulders down. You're still in your imprint, so check that low back. I'm gonna exhale, curl up and tap my left elbow to my right thigh, and then lower back down. And we'll do that 5 more times. So legs stay still, exhale to twist, tap, and lower. And for 4, nodding the chin, exhaling. Nice. And for 3, keeping those legs really steady. For 2, and last one. Nice, and you can pull those legs in for a moment. We're gonna come back to that same setup for our leg circle, but we're gonna go for our full leg circle this time. So if you wanna lengthen the left leg out or keep it bent, that's up to you, just keep it really active. We're gonna extend the right leg as much as possible for our circles. More support, arms down, a little less support, arms up to the ceiling. So lots of oblique here. So I'm gonna cross my midline, you get 5 circles again. Inhaling and exhaling through that hardest moment when that leg is out to the side in that bottom corner here. Got 3 more. Can you get your glute to work a little bit more for you? So the more you're supporting and your working leg hips are active, you're gonna have a little bit more support in this so the obliques aren't alone, and then we'll reverse it. So inhaling and exhaling here. For 2. Nice. 3. Awesome. Keep reaching out of that supporting line. 2. Last one. Nice. And you can clasp your hands behind your right thigh. We're going to pull the thigh up to our chest, flex our foot, and we're just going to take a couple knee pumps to stretch it out. So I'm going to kick my heel to the ceiling and then bend. And so it doesn't really matter if the leg goes straight. It's just keeping your thigh wherever you pull it to. You're going to try to keep that thigh straight, or still rather. And if you want to add like a little point and a little flex, or maybe some ankle circles on a couple of these, feel free to explore some movement through the foot and the toes. We'll just do one more like this. Nice. So we'll bend the legs back. We're gonna do kind of that whole set again. So we're gonna come into our bicycles, clasp your hands the opposite way, so kind of the way that feels a bit weird. Come into your imprint and float your legs one at a time into tabletop. So again, head down or head up. We're gonna come into our slow bicycles. So I'm just asymmetrically holding as I switch. Nice. Yeah, and good attention to keeping that supporting leg really steady. So our pelvis is connected, so we're much more likely to grip somewhere If that supporting knee starts to wander off to the side or turn out a little bit. So the next time your left thigh is in, you're gonna keep your left thigh in. Right leg, you can choose how high or how low you wanna hold it. We'll lower the head and shoulders down. Take a nice breath in. You're gonna exhale to curl up. Try to tap your right elbow to your left thigh and lower back down. And we'll just do that 5 more times. Nice, so the more you can use your right leg to lengthen, it'll kind of help support you coming up and down. We've got one more here. Nice, you can bend that leg in, place the foot down, either keeping the leg bent or long. We'll go into those leg circles on the other side. So really active through that bum. When you're ready, we'll cross the midline first, inhaling and exhaling to sweep out to that corner. Right, and ideally we've kind of found our range in terms of the hip isn't clicking. It's okay if the leg isn't perfectly straight. Can you fire both hips here? Got one more like this. And then we'll reverse. So keeping those floating ribs from popping, little check in here. How's the breath? You can certainly have just a completely smooth breath if you notice that kind of trying to coordinate Pilates breath makes you hold your breath. We got one more like this. And then you can bend that leg. You're gonna clasp your hands, kind of flip to your unnatural clasp, and we'll do a couple knee pumps here. So you're gonna draw your thigh as close to your chest as possible, flex your foot, and then kick that leg up. So it's okay if the knee doesn't straighten, try to reach that heel to the ceiling, finding some length through that left side body. And if you wanna throw in a couple points or flexes or circles just to explore that space and that stretch, we'll just do one more like this. Nice, you can lengthen that leg out. So we're gonna go for some full roll-ups here. If you're working on roll-up, a great strategy is to bend the legs, sweep the arms overhead, use a little bit of momentum. So you'll inhale and exhale here, and then you can grab your legs to assist you back up, right? So it's a good option. And then you can do the same on the way back down. If you're feeling pretty good with roll-up, and you've got your fitness ring or your ball, you can hold it and you can play with squeezing as you roll down. And so even if I've got my ball or my yoga block, I can still squeeze and I can get a little bit of lat engagement here. And then we'll just roll it all the way down. So one vertebrae at a time. I'm really trying to flip my pelvis all the way before my ribs connect. Arms sweeping overhead. Right? Follow the prop with your eyes. That can be really helpful for that cervical spine. Yeah, and it's nice sometimes even having load will kind of help us come up a little bit, but see if you can squeeze in that moment. That's the most challenging. So kind of that low back piece. The crunch is usually easy right about here. Can you squeeze your, yeah, nice, exactly. Feel free to go for that stretch. We'll just do a couple more like this. Even weight through both sides. You can always take a little peek at your hips and just make sure that you're rotating equally. Inhaling and exhaling. Yeah, we'll do one more like this. And challenge yourself to see if you can take like a full breath the whole time. So just notice if we get to a spot where the breath isn't coming in or out, kind of get stuck in the state of holding. Yeah, nice. So we're gonna roll all the way down on this next one. We're gonna turn to our side for a little side leg work. So you can set your prop off for a moment here. I'm gonna roll to my left side, whichever side, as long as you remember. And then whatever feels most comfortable for your heads. You can always bend the elbow or lengthen the arm here. We're gonna start with the bottom leg actively engaged. So flexing the foot, getting the quad engaged, and then the top leg's just gonna stay bent. So my foot's behind me, nice and parallel, my top leg's just resting. I'm gonna lift my bottom obliques, and I'm just gonna float that top thigh up. And the foot and shin are just nice and easy. And so as you're lifting, if you ever notice that your shin is really engaged, just give yourself a little reminder that the hip is gonna be the leader here, and that lower leg can just be relaxed. And there's a tendency where we might notice when we get really high that we start to sink into the bottom side of the obliques. So think of reaching your leg away so that you can keep the bottom side still active. So you're not necessarily increasing the weightedness of it. And we'll just try a couple more like this. Bring that leg nice and parallel. Your stack is staying strong. So last one here. So we're gonna take our top arm, we're gonna reach forward on the diagonal as we kick the top leg back. And then we're gonna come back into that bent position. So everything returns in, and then we exhale to sweep forward. This is a really nice one. You might feel a little bit more supported. So you can really extend that leg back. Hopefully we're starting to feel some glute activation here. And just letting the head be nice and easy. So just notice if that head wants to get engaged and lift here. We'll try 2 more like this. And last one. All right, we're gonna make some circles. So we'll extend that top leg out. If you need more support, you can always bend that bottom leg. We're gonna float it to about hip height, relax the foot. We're just gonna make some nice circles. So your bottom foot is gonna be the center of your circle. So you just wanna make sure that you're going equally back to front. And again, only as high. So high can mean a little bit of dipping here and hiking in this hip. So think of reaching out. And then we'll reverse that circle. So kind of much like our leg circles, there's a ton of work happening in the obliques and in the supporting leg so that we can minimize kind of the instability of the torso here. And hopefully the leg's starting to get a little bit tired. And then take a little rest. Nice, we feel some hip. A little bit, you can give it a little like, thank you. We'll flip onto our stomach for a little extension here. So we're gonna play with internal and external rotation of the arms and the shoulder blades. So I'm in internal rotation here. So my shoulder blades are protracted, nice and relaxed and schlumpy on the ground. I can rest on one cheek. I'm gonna find my glutes and hamstrings by pressing down to the tops of my feet and find my abs. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is when I rotate forward, I'm gonna spin my arm bones out. So I'm in this little hover. Then I get to extend all of my limbs off the ground. Take a nice breath in, and then I'm gonna lower all the way back down. So glutes and hamstrings and core, little float to face the ground. Find your arms spinning so your shoulder blades are set on your spine, and then a little float up, and then a lengthen and a lower. And you can start to integrate this a little bit more. So it doesn't have to be quite as step by step, unless you notice that the form kind of falls apart, and then you can keep it a little more piecemeal. We're just gonna take a couple more like this. Let's go for 4 more. I'm just gonna show the shoulder blade movement. So if I'm nice and schlumpy, and then I'm gonna find this nice rolling as my arm bones spin out, and I get this natural retraction that opens my chest. Yeah, that looks really nice. And if you ever try lifting with your back rounded, it's pretty uncomfortable. You have to use your neck a lot. So when we finish our last one of 4, and that nice little extension, we can bring the hands by the ribs here, use your core and just press back. Take one nice active breath in your child's pose, just rounding that low back. Nice. We'll come back to our hands and knees positions. We're gonna do our same side bird dog, fun little challenge. So I'm pushing so strongly out of my supporting limbs, so we'll say left is gonna support first, that I can actually start to off weight my right hand, my right knee, and then maybe eventually my whole right foot. So lots of work here in the outer hip and the shoulder. And then I'm gonna slowly lower back down. Goal is to not crash, and then try the other side. So same side's pretty tricky. We do a lot of oppositional, but we don't always do the same. So maybe I'm here, maybe that foot's giving me a little bit of support. That's totally cool. Maybe I'm coming all the way up. And then with control, lowering back down. Yeah, nice. And if you want to get even more exciting with it, you have the option as well. We'll kind of keep alternating sides to go all the way into a little reach. So obviously, further away our limbs, more load on the shoulder and the hip. So in a fun way, still obliques. This is a really great exercise if you're working towards side plank to check out your shoulder position. If we're ever like kind of popped forward, we want to think about actually retracting and pushing away here so that we're getting a really strong position for when we do go into side planking. This is a nice way to kind of build that strength and learn in our bodies where that position should be. So here's that retraction. I'm keeping my trunk nice and stable. And so even yourself out here. And then we'll cross our ankles. Don't worry, we'll do the second side of side leg series, but we'll do a little ab break in between. So for this next one, we're gonna do a little bit of half roll back. We're gonna switch up our arms. So if you have your ring or your ball, you can grab this guy again. This time we're gonna hold it instead of have it in between our thighs. We're gonna roll back to a place where we feel like we can maintain that C curve again. So it doesn't matter how low we go as long as we can keep it. As we exhale, we're gonna sweep the arms up and then inhale to bring the arms back down. Yeah, and it's a ton of core work to allow your shoulder blades to move without pulling your ribs with it or your neck. So just keep an eye out if the head wants to do a little bit of weight shifting, right? In theory, I should be able to turn my head from side to side and all of this. Can you keep a little bit of a squeeze? So whether you've got your ball or your block, you could do this obviously again without any props. We're only gonna go so high as we can also keep our hip flexors out of it. Yeah, nice. Curl up on this next one. Little breath for a moment. We'll roll back right away. We're gonna do some rotation. So I'm gonna take, again, like we did with our first little ab crunch, I'm gonna let my waist twist, bring that ring over. So my left hand is over my right thigh, right hand over my left thigh, still maintaining that curl through the low pelvis. And then notice if the knees wanna shift at all. Take a couple more like this. So I wanna make sure that my thighs are staying really, really steady. So if I start to kind of get a little bit of a shift here, or if my ribs start to shear, can you keep your ribs in line with your hips, which is tricky. Lots to think about. We love overthinking at work, yeah. And just let your eyes turn with you too, so that your sternum comes. So we'll take one more each way, just to really cook the core a bit. Nice, then you can roll it all the way down nice and slow and controlled. Then you can set your prop off to the side and then roll to your second side. I'm facing the wrong way, but I'm gonna do my right side now. So if you didn't do your right side or whichever side, activate through that bottom leg. So really get your quad and your inner thigh on. Give it a little test. So if your oblique's kind of dipping, can you lift slightly? It'll help keep that hip from falling into your waist. And then with the top leg bent, we're just gonna float up and down. And my shin's just nice and easy. I'm kind of making sure that I've got this general stack of shoulders, ribs, and hips. And then whatever is comfortable on your neck. Yeah, and it's fine if we need to adjust the kind of neck padding from side to side. We don't always have asymmetrical like lying patterns from side to side either. And you just want to make sure if this feels like front of the hip feels like it's doing a lot of your work, we want the outer hip to feel like it's doing a lot of work. So sometimes just having like a hand tactily can give us some good info. We want to allow the thigh to float up without feeling like we have to like clench and brace the outer hip or the bum to lift. A couple more like this. And just noticing that the stability of this side, it's kind of like foundation of a house, right? The stability of your supporting team gives your gesture leg a lot more freedom to move. So on this next one, we'll bend that left arm. You're gonna sweep your arm forward in opposition to that back leg and then come back in. And just letting the head rest the whole time. Really go for a big sweep. So think about the diagonals of your yoga mat. See if you could actually reach your top leg even further past that bottom diagonal. I'm just trying to resist the urge to twist. Some nice easy breath here. Again, supporting side's gonna be a big player in stability. Let's go for 3 more like this. Last 2. And last 1. You can lengthen that top leg all the way out here. About hip height, we're gonna take some circles. So you're thinking of the front and the back of your yoga mat. Your foot's the center of the circle. So I'm using that as my reference point here. And just keeping that hip from wanting to hike up, legs staying nice and neutral. We're gonna reverse these. And if the shin ever feels like it's working a lot, relax the foot, right? Come back to, it's my hip joint. You should feel the work kind of in the outer hip versus the front of the hip here. And just slightly turning the leg in can be a good way to cue that away. So if you're like, oh, my front hip is really working, just rotate the thigh so it's a little bit more medially rotated, and that should take us out of TFL pretty easily. And then you can take a little rest. Second side can be harder because that first side already had to work right as it's stabilizing. So we're gonna do a little glute extension on our back here. If you wanna play with the ringer or the ball, you can absolutely add them in. You can also just do heels touching. For ring, since we've got it in class, we can definitely play with this one. Half the challenge is getting into it. So I want it in between my ankles, and depending, you can either face and flip, or if you have the range, you can always reach back and put it in. So I've got my feet flexed. If you don't have a prop, you're gonna do heels together. You're in slight turnout. So whatever's the most comfortable, about shoulder distance, maybe a little bit wider. And you'll have your hands underneath your forehead here, head resting down. And so I'm just gonna try at first. Yep, and if you wanna just do heels together, you can. So I'm just gonna squeeze and try to get my bum to turn on. And that's all I'm doing. So I'm just resting, finding a little glute squeeze and release. When you're doing your glute squeeze, there's a difference between a tucked under bum and activating the glutes. So you don't want to feel like you're smashing your pubic bone into the ground. There will be kind of a weight change. So that can get a little bit tricky sometimes to tell the difference between, but you want to find that tonally your bum's turning on versus your pelvis changing positions. And then once you've done this a couple times, you can keep the bum on, try to get your upper hamstrings to float, and see if you can lift your knees and then lower it back down. So glutes, even if it's just the intention of floating, right? If you've got sensitive hips, this might be one that you want to pad for. Or maybe you don't want to deal with the float, you just want to get the glute squeeze going. So really good hip extensor, awesome for if you sit, right, drive, work at a computer, everything that we do all the time. I'm gonna make this a little harder, the last version. We're gonna float up, we're gonna lengthen the legs out and then lower down, and then you'll re-bend. So bum turns on, abs of course are supporting. I'm gonna try to float my knees up. I'm gonna keep squeezing on that ringer ball or heels together, lengthen out and then lower back down. We'll try that just a couple more times. It's a lot of coordination too. Like we don't often do this. So a secret to back extension is having really good glute extension. So if you want more back mobility and more extension through your back, we wanna have really strong glutes. So hip extensors are a huge backdoor kind of pathway to better back extension. We'll just do one more like this. And then you can just shake it out here. You can get rid of your ring or ball, bend your legs, and just give your knees a little, or feet rather, a little swipe from side to side. It's okay if your feet were like, what is going on? And they overworked a little bit. That tends to happen. And then we'll lengthen the legs out here. We'll do a little bit more extension. So we're gonna take this into a little breaststroke prep. I've got my hands, don't feel limited by the mat. You can go a little bit wider. My glutes are on. I definitely found them. Glutes and hamstrings. Core is on. I'm going to let my shoulder blades lift first, and then I'm going to undulate chest and head forward, and then lower back down. So my floating ribs are still on the ground. So I'm not coming up super, super high, but I want to find this sequence of shoulder blades and then lifting my gaze versus head and then trying to lift. I'm going to find I'm a little bit more limited. So see if you can lift from your shoulder blades first. If you want to make this harder, just float the hands up and lower back down. So bum and core on to support the whole time. You can add just a little bit more work in the upper back by floating the arms up. And we'll take maybe 2 to 4 more of these. So kind of work at the pace that you are going. Should be able to breathe pretty fluidly here. Right? It will feel like upper back work. If it feels like low back is kind of being wrenched, ask yourself if your bum is on and if your core is on, and then take some of the load off. Use your arms. And so we'll take that last one and then we'll push back into a child's pose. We'll add a little side bend to this one. So whether you have knees apart or knees together, you can sweep your arms to the right, and then you can push so that your left hip is going to be a little more weighted, and you're going to get a nice stretch through the left side of the body. You can always take your hand and place it under your forehead here for a little rest. And as you're taking this child's pose, I'll just kind of yak at you for a moment, but take a couple breaths. So back extension can be really tricky, right? So thinking about it in the way that we do our ab work too, of I'm going to support more and take load off so that I can work well in my form. So great strategy if it ever feels like, oh, it's like getting a little bit ginchy, just like more support. Hands down, more surface area. Let's try the other side here. So we'll swoop over to the left and let the right hip fall out to the side. Again, you can always let that head rest. We kind of use those principles of more support until I feel like the form feels really good, and then you can start to add more load to it. But glutes and abs will be really helpful in all of your extension work, which is pretty cool. And then just take one more child's pose in the middle here. Last one. And then we'll start to walk our hands back. So we'll do a little thread the needle, coming back to your hands and knees. Before we thread the needle, we're just gonna do some twists from side to side. So alternating, I'm gonna push out of one arm, and I'm just gonna sweep that arm up and over and try to look back. And this is a tricky range, and then we'll alternate. We'll just do 3 each way. Let your hips rotate. If they do, that's totally fine. See if you can challenge yourself to breathe as you do this. It's actually pretty hard to keep breathing in this twist. It's mobilizing that thoracic spine. Tends to get a little bit sticky. And then we'll try thread the needle. So we'll go for 3. So go for full twist as kind of your goal. So I want to turn my torso to one side, really pushing out of my arm. And then when I come through this hole, right, here's my little gap. See if you can let your torso rotate all the way to the other side. And you can absolutely bias more weight into your hips. So I'm a little bit more weighted back so that my poor shoulder doesn't have to do all the work here. I'm going for more the stretch component. We'll just do one more like this. And then you can rest your ear on the ground and then take a couple breaths. Use your right arm or your arm that is up as a support. So I can take some of the weight off. I can also reach it a little higher and assist my twist. And just try to take 3 breaths here. And then bring that hand back so it's going to be more supportive. Find your core, find your hips, and then untwist here. And then we'll try 3 on the other side. Yeah, nice. So again, here's my first kind of piece of my side plank rotation as I twist. And then I'm going to come through, see if you can twist your torso all the way through to the other direction. And you might find that you've got one spot that's particularly sticky. Maybe both sides are moving really well, and that's awesome. Last one like this. And then we're gonna set that arm down, resting on the shoulder, resting on the ear, right? I can use this hand to take off some of the weight, but I can also use it to rotate my torso just a little bit more. And try just 3 breaths here. Breathing into that shoulder stretch. And then we'll bring the hand back, find your core, and then push and unravel here. And then we'll come all the way in. Nice, you can cross your ankles. We're gonna come onto our bum. We're just gonna do a little rotational stuff. So walk your feet out a little further away. And then with the hands either down for support or maybe challenge with the hands up, you're just gonna do a little rotation of the thighs. So I've got one thigh rotating out and one thigh rotating in. And then I'm gonna switch. If my feet are really close, it can be a little bit hard. So kind of the further your feet are away can be a little bit more helpful. Here's your outer hip. So this is all of our side glute work that's kind of helping me open this thigh and then allowing my pelvis to stay as neutral as possible. Yeah, really nice. So here's that outer hip. So it's almost like I'm kind of sucking the thigh into the hip socket in order to get that rotation. And you might find you start to like crawl forward a little bit in this, which is totally normal. And we'll just take 4 more like this. So just getting some mobilization right. And if you needed more support, you can always have hands behind too. And that just gives us a little bit more space sometimes. Nice, then we'll lengthen the right leg out and we'll bring the left leg in. If you need to sit up on something, you're more than welcome to. So we're gonna rotate the torso to face our bent leg so that we're in line with the long leg. I'm gonna have my right arm either down in front or I can bring it onto my opposite hip to keep this hip heavy. And we're just gonna do a nice little side stretch. And just keep it nice and sweepy. If shoulder doesn't love this, you could also do like hand at the back of the head or like a Pledge of Allegiance kind of grip. We're just trying to stay nice and heavy through that left hip as we sweep towards that foot. Try one more like this. Nice, and then you can turn your torso towards your straight leg. And then just take a nice little hamstring stretch here. So hinging from the hip, I can walk my hands forward. Take a couple breaths if you want to kind of undulate in and out of this. If you want more of a spine stretch, you can relax your head towards your thigh. So it's less about trying to grab the foot, but more about rounding the spine. And just take maybe 2 or 3 breaths here. And I'm going to use my arms and my core and then start to support to kind of stack back up. Nice. We'll pass through middle so you can bring your feet together and we're going to do a couple cat-cows in our butterfly position. So I'm going to hold on to my feet and I'm going to round my pelvis back. So I'm off my sits bones and I'm going to let my upper back stretch here for a moment. And then I'm going to draw my sits bones forward, chest forward, bend my elbows and extend my sternum to the ceiling. So it's like a nice little cat-cow here in your pelvis and in your spine. So you kind of hang in your arms for a moment and then using your abs, roll onto your sits bones and then extend your chest up. And we'll just do one more like this, then we'll try the other side of that side stretch. Tuck your chin. Nice, yeah, and then you'll lengthen that left leg out. You can draw your right leg in, rotate your chest so that you're facing your bent leg, and then either hand to the inside or maybe hand to the same thigh, and we'll take a couple of side stretches here. Yeah, and whichever is more helpful. So if you want to take, again, more load off, maybe I'm gonna bring my arm down so I've got a little bit more support in this stretch. If I notice that it's really hard to keep my hip from floating up, maybe I'm gonna give myself a little reminder. And you can always switch your arm up. We'll take about 2 more like this. Last one. And then we'll rotate the chest over the straight leg. And then you can think of kind of pulling your hip in or your thigh in its hip socket and hinging, and then you can kind of lean forward. So I'm trying to keep a straight spine for that hamstring stretch. The more you flex the foot, you're gonna get a little bit more. Take a couple of breaths here. If this feels like you're looking for more of a spine stretch, you can round your upper back. Think of getting like the top of your head to your knee, so it's less about going for the foot. When we flex the spine, we're gonna get a spine stretch. When we keep the spine vertical and hinge from the hips, we're gonna get more of a hip, so hamstring stretch, calf stretch. We'll take one more breath like this. And then you can support yourself up, and we'll come all the way onto our backs just for a little figure four and a twist to finish. So you can support yourself all the way down, and we'll cross the right ankle over the left thigh first. You're gonna clasp your hands behind your thigh, and then trying to keep your pelvis as even as possible here, draw those legs up into your chest. And maybe you wanna just gently press that thigh back. Maybe you wanna add a little bit of movement, some rocking or some circles. Feel free to play with your toes and ankles here. So circles, pointing and flexing, kind of crunching toes, spreading toes. So we'll take the right leg, we're gonna cross it all the way over the left thigh, and then we'll let the legs fall to the left. So my right thigh is on top, legs are falling to the left. And then I'm gonna reach my right arm in opposition. So getting a little twist here. If this is too much in the low back, you can just uncross the legs and go back to that simple stretch. Maybe turning the head if that feels good. Go for about 3 breaths here with that image of your inner tube. So trying to find some space in between your ribs and your ribs and your hips here. And then just gently bending the legs and letting them rock back to your starting point. You can uncross and cross that left ankle over your right thigh, and then threading the hands underneath that right thigh, keeping the hips pretty even here as you draw the legs up. And then take a couple breaths in your figure four on the opposite side. And again, whatever your body is craving, and it's pretty good at telling us kind of what it needs. Like, oh, maybe I just need to stop and breathe in this. Maybe movement feels really good. I'm gonna take this moment to listen to what it's requesting. And then you can gently cross that left leg over the right, and we'll let the legs fall to the right. Left arm's gonna sweep in opposition. Maybe the head rotates. Right, if this is too much, going into that simple stack is a nice option, especially if there's anything going on in the SI here. And just take a couple breaths here, maybe closing the eyes. Little body scan. How's this side feeling? How's the breath? And then just gently bending the legs. And then you can bring those knees back up to the ceiling here. And just think about how you want to exit. So if you want a little more energy, maybe a couple rock and rolls to come up. Maybe you want to roll to the side. Maybe one last really nice controlled roll up. Just kind of thinking about what's going to kind of fit your energy level. How do you want to leave? Yeah, nice. Lovely. And I'll leave you guys there today. Yeah, good work. I'm glad you made it. Oh, yeah. No, I'm glad you did. Thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day. Mike will be back next week.